Hello everyone, my name is Steven and welcome to Storytime. Today we're going to be reading some malicious compliance stories, tales where following the rules can lead to some just desserts. And let me just say, if you're not already subscribed to Storytime, please consider doing so. But with that being said, let's sit back, relax, and listen to some captivating Reddit stories. My employers wanted me to bill them by the hour, so I billed them by the hour. A bit of backstory. I have for some years now worked at some local farms as farm assistants. Because employers gotta pay employee fees to the state, I was hired by a medium-sized company that rents out assistants to farms so they can rent me without paying the employee fee, which is a quite large percentage of what the employee earns. I later discovered that the company I technically worked for took about 25% of what the farm owners paid them in order to pay me. And the only work they're basically doing is doing the taxes for me. So I decided to quit and start my own private company where I rent myself out to them for the same price they paid that company and still do the same work with a substantially higher income, with the only extra work being that I have to do my own taxes from now on. Or so that was the idea. The farmers get a set amount of money from the state as aid to hire farm assistants, so they wouldn't be losing money by this. The amount they get in aid from the state is about 80 grand each a year. I only got 60 grand of that from the company I was hired under. This isn't money that can go to themselves since the aid is paid after they pay me. Edit, that is 80 grand aid for each farm, meaning 240 grand in total since I worked on 3 farms. Edit 2, it's not in US dollars. Divide by 9 I think to get my value. For readers following along, that's about 26.5 grand USD for all 3 farms together. While I was still employed at that company, my employers, just for the sake of doing everything easy, just counted the days I worked at their farm with a fixed hour. Since it was about 2 hours work on each farm, they just wrote on the hour list that they sent to my company that I've worked 2 hours a day. So when I started up for myself, things took a turn for the worse because they tried to push me over a bit for their own convenience. I offered a deal to keep things similar and easy as before, where I set a price for a day's work, so even if I ended up working longer a day, I won't charge extra and the yearly amount is the same they paid to the company I used to be hired under, and I still do just as much work. They, however, were not satisfied with that since they saw an opportunity to exploit this for their own benefit. They wanted me to get paid by the hour and work a day more a week. I reluctantly accepted because they wouldn't budge, and it's worse going without a job. I'd still get a decent higher hourly wage than before and still earn the amount a year I'd planned to earn by going independent. But instead of the extra work being just the taxes, I also now ended up working more days. In the new contract I wrote with them, it was stated I have to write up the hours by the minute and send them the time I used every day. The easiness from before has been completely tossed out the window. So their hope is obviously get more hours out of me on the money they're already paid by the state. Cue the malicious compliance. I started using a stopwatch and noted down the hours by the minute, which turned out to be some minutes more than 2 hours a day. On occasion, the farm owner stopped by while I worked and we stood and talked for a bit. Could quickly be 15 to 30 minutes, which was mainly work-related talks. What needed fixing or upgrading and stuff like that, so I let the clock continue ticking. Also, on regular intervals, I had to clear out the poop, which also took an additional 15 to 20 minutes. Toilet breaks were also added. The time it took to walk between farms was added and other small stuff. Needless to say, they needed to pay me more than the amount they got as aid, and farmers in this country don't really earn much because the expenses such as food for the animals takes away most of the income. So they were not happy about having to pay me close to $10,000 more a year each. Something they would have avoided had they not been greedy and accepted my first deal. They then wanted me to work less days some weeks, which was fine because I started to feel a bit overworked, but they also wanted me to not add the chats in with the work time, which I refused. Apparently they wanted to take me to court over that, but as I've heard from one of their wives, someone I grew up with as a neighbor and also thinks this whole thing is silly, that the lawyer heavily recommended not to take it to civil court since I would most likely win since work-related chats during work time would be counted as work. So I am almost no longer seeing them at all by the farm when I'm working. I have offered again the deal I proposed in the start, but for some reason they are against it. Would have made everyone's life a lot easier since they pay me the same for the same amount of work anyway. The only thing I can really pick off on this is maybe they didn't want to hire you at the same price they're already paying because they can just keep paying that company the same price regardless. Just because it's the same price might not mean that they want to go along with it. That's just maybe a thought on it. But hey, in the end, OP managed to work it around and get it working in their favor anyways, which is great for them. You want to pay the postage? Okay. So I recently started working at a new job at a Canadian retail company that has online services. My job is mainly to pick items that were ordered online from the store's aisles or from our warehouse, arrange for them to be picked up, and have them ready to go by a set time every day. We average about 5 to 6 items per day, most going to places that are between a half hour to a 2-hour drive distance, depending on the direction it goes, as other retail stores can cover the same area better than we can. Now, I live in a smallish city, and the company that picks up the online purchases, with a lack of a local terminal, have to go to the capital to their sorting site before traveling to their destination. This means a minimum of 2 days before it gets to a customer, but could be up to a week depending on delays. So we reach out and try to convince customers that live locally to pick up their purchases. Usually once they realize that it would take 20 minutes to get their item and without charging the extra cost of delivery, most are willing to pick their items up. Now, of course, there are the exceptions. I'm not talking about the elderly and physically disabled who cannot make such a trip. We implemented at our store a delivery exemption initiative for these people. We deliver it to them for free. No, we are talking about this one customer. He lives literally down the street from the store. As in a 3-minute drive down the street. As in we have employees who walk past his house. And he ordered not 1, not 2, but 3 items. Put just over $500 on his credit card for this, and wanted them shipped out to him via the delivery company. We saw immediately that it would cost him almost half on top of what he is paying for the items to ship these. I forgot to mention that all postage is paid by the customer. So I call the customer, explaining that where his purchases were coming from, the extra cost and time of delivering these through the company, and that he could save both if he came to pick up the items he ordered. His response: "I have ordered these online and I expect that they will be sent." I clearly tried to explain that his items were coming from down the street, not from a store elsewhere in the province. His response: "I don't care where they come from. I expect my online order to be delivered as you would with anyone else." Okay, will do. Cue malicious compliance. After hanging up, we did as asked. I let the managers know about this order and his instructions, which he laughs at and shrugs his shoulders. We picked his items, scheduled a delivery for said items, had all 3 picked up. Delivery guy looks at the delivery address, looks at me, and gives me a what the freak look. I explained that he wanted it shipped like all other online deliveries. He laughs, shakes his head, and takes the items. So the next couple days I track the order as it travels over 2 hours to the sorting facility, stays overnight, is on the truck for delivery, and finally is signed by the guy. Not an hour later, he's at the store demanding the cost of his delivery back. Manager explains that we tried to help him, but in his own words, shipped his online order as we would anything else. I don't know what this guy was expecting. He literally got a courtesy call that he didn't even have to do that to tell him that his items are literally 3 minutes away, just come pick them up. No, I want them delivered, they're an online delivery. Clearly this guy wasn't having a very bright moment. Want something bought? Here you go. So this is a story of my mom's workplace. She's a therapist for seniors without medical duties, so essentially a babysitter for old people. Many of them have Alzheimer's or other sorts of dementia. They play games, she reads them books and helps them with eating. This being said, she is almost 60 herself now, and some of the people she takes care of are barely 5 years older than her. She got into a new job at a retirement home 3 years ago, and 6 months ago it got sold to a new company, and all the higher management positions got replaced by people from said company. Slowly, discontent started to grow between the lower supervisors because rules and standing orders have been changed in ridiculous ways. A few examples. The therapist had drawn and painted a lot of pictures with the residents, and some of them were really beautiful. All had to be removed, and after asking for a reason, they said people could get hurt by the pieces of paper on the walls. Next day, everything was gone, thrown away by the new facility management company. The therapists had their constant station, floors they work on, so they always had the same residents to take care of, which helps when some of the really lonely residents had a person they knew. the new management put a new rotation into effect that all therapists go up a floor each week, 5 floors, so that they would see their regular residents every 5 weeks. As it happens, sometimes the person you took care of 5 weeks ago was dead when you'd return. She was super unhappy with the new conditions, as were others. Quite a few of her colleagues quit the job and new applicants were rare, so they had to take care of more residents, shortening the time they can watch after 1 resident per day. Ultimately, she decided to quit too. Sure, it's bad for the residents, but this work environment made her actually sick. One day on our last week, one of the executives of the new management was there and she happened to be working on the same floor that week. She was called into the meeting to buy food for the conference, and the executive gave her a very detailed list of what to buy. It was relatively expensive altogether. She objected, saying she still has 20 residents to take care of and that her contract didn't include shopping. The boss interrupted her, saying, "You work for me, so do your job and do what I say." As she left the room to comply, he also said to her to bring him a bottle of whiskey. She got his private credit card for that. She left and went shopping. She bought exactly what was on the list, and finally she took a super bad scotch and put it on the same transaction, therefore making it impossible for the entire transaction to get a tax refund or to declare it as company expenses, as it is not allowed here to declare alcohol as company expenses during business hours. So one time, food on the boss, and probably the worst whiskey to ever touch his lips. Yeah, that's absolutely a terrible idea. It's a good idea to let the residents get a consistent person that is usually there helping them. Imagine a resident says something or creates a legitimate bond with one of these people, and then they don't see them again for 5 weeks. It would be a terrible morale hit for these people when a lot of times they don't have much left, which is probably the biggest thing I'm taking away and the saddest thing. Okay, I'll teach you everything. I just got out of my Algebra 2 class for lunch and I really needed to type this up. So, I'm in a class with absolute morons. Everyone in that class talks all through the period and then complains when they don't understand the lesson. Always going, "But you never taught us that." I'm one of, I think, 3 students who actually pay attention. The class is almost comically easy, so I finish the assignment in no time and then read for the rest of the class. My teacher, who we'll call Mr. M for malicious compliance, doesn't care that I read. As long as I'm not talking, he's glad for someone he can call on who doesn't say, "I don't know," when asked for the answer to number 7. So today, the class was already 30 minutes in because no one would finish the warm-up. Finally, Mr. M got up to go over the answers. He solved number 1 at his usual pace, but apparently, that was too fast for the student that was talking. The exchange went something like this. "Wait, how do I put log into my calculator?" Mind you, we were taught that at the beginning of the unit. We taught that a few days ago. You press the lid button on your calculator under the second button. Another student says, "You never taught us that." And another student says, "Yeah, you never taught us how to do this either." This was review from yesterday. Mr. M always has to deal with stuff like this, and I was finishing the assignment he had handed out, that the rest of the class wasn't even on, when I saw him grin. A small, poop-eating grin. Mr. M said, "Alright, I'll teach all of you everything." Mr. M then proceeded in a very slow tone to explain the warm-up. He went over how to put log into the calculator, then how to put numbers into the calculator, and how to press the equal sign. The class starts to get confused at him teaching this. Once he has taught them to get the answer, it comes to writing the answer. This brilliant mother freaker taught everyone how to freaking write numbers. For every number in the answer, he did the same slow, wordy explanation of how to write the freaking number. It went something like this. Okay, so now we have the answer 1.07. To write that, let's start with 1. Now, how you draw a 1 is you put your pencil here. Then you keep it on the paper as you move your hand down for about 1/4 of an inch. There! Now you have a 1. Now, how you draw a decimal is... One of the students interrupted. "Yo, we already know how to draw numbers." "Hey, you said I hadn't taught you everything." Mic drop. Whole class was silent as I silently wheezed in the back. So Mr. M proceeded to go over how to draw every single number, and all the kids groaned in defeat. I had a heck of a laugh. Oh my lord, this is a beautiful execution of malicious compliance. Listen, I've had my fair share of classes where a lot of the students were not very good students, and I would have loved to have witnessed a teacher do something like this. It's what those kids absolutely deserved. Hopefully it was like a little bit of slow torture for them having to learn how to draw each individual number and decimal. Mom figures out how to get paid to be a mom. My mom and dad got married in 1981 at 18 years old and have been happily-ish most of the time married since. To make the complexities of their dynamic brief, my mom is a type A, Minnesota nice suburban housewife. She's the kind of friend who will hold your hand at chemotherapy appointments and pick up your kids from school if they're sick but you're at work. My dad is an eccentric, successful financial fiduciary and has been a highly functional stoner alcoholic since maybe 1975. My dad brings in all the money but has no control over it. Mom does exemplary bookkeeping and makes sure everything is paid. One day in 2011, my mom was complaining to my father about the finances and, frustrated, my father snapped at her. "Well, if you don't like it, why don't you go out and get a job then?" Mom basically said, fine. She got a nannying job for a couple with one kid. She tidies up and folds laundry and makes 30 grand a year. It's not much, but it helps her pay a few bills, and the family absolutely loves her, so she gets Christmas presents and gets to go on trips with them when they travel for work. The youngest is 16 at this point, so there's no more little kids to take care of at the home, but now dad has to get used to doing the dishes and making dinner and waiting for somebody to come home to him. Us kids made semi-sarcastic remarks about how mom found a new family and was abandoning us. Everything worked out well. The family had a second baby, so now she brings in a good 50 grand to help with the bills, and dad and the family got used to the changes. I think my mom feels really fulfilled in her job, and it helped the kids gain some extra independence before college. I'm 24 now and learning to balance working hard and keeping a home life. My parents are still happily married, and I look to them as role models. Good on OP's mom for going out, getting a job, and making some money and feeling really fulfilled and honestly enjoying herself, because it sounds like the perks are pretty nice. Overall, a kind of wholesome malicious compliance, and I'm happy to see it. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to and watching the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing, let us know what you thought about these stories, and leave any feedback you can in the comments below. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.